Christmas night didn't sound like silence. It felt like a locked door. Because when a family built on exposure suddenly goes quiet, that quiet isn't peace, it's containment. What viewers saw was calm faces and clipped conversations. What they didn't see was the moment that forced production to pull the plug. This isn't about a missing argument. It's about a system activating. In the Brown family, conflict has always been currency, until the night it became a liability. One side absorbed the emotional cost. Another side benefited from protection, narrative control, and long-term positioning. And the cameras, they didn't stop rolling. They just stopped telling the truth. Here's the disturbing pattern. The spark is removed, but the smoke stays. Strained smiles. Silent children. Defensive body language. That's not calm. That's damage management. And when damage control replaces storytelling, the real cost isn't drama. It's psychological fallout, legacy distortion, and money quietly choosing a winner. Tonight, we're not recapping an episode. We're dissecting why it was edited to survive. Stay with this investigation, because the evidence isn't loud, but it's everywhere. And once you see the system behind the silence, you can't unsee it. The silence that started the questions. Christmas night was never meant to be quiet. In the Brown family, Christmas had always been loud. Children moving between houses, overlapping traditions, competing emotions, and cameras capturing every uncomfortable moment. Yet this particular Christmas night unfolded differently. What viewers eventually saw on television was calm, controlled, almost uneventful. But what they didn't see, that silence, is what sparked the questions. Because when a show built on emotional exposure suddenly goes quiet, the absence becomes the story. Within days of the episode airing, fans began asking a simple question. What was cut, and why? Why Christmas matters in this story. To understand the missing footage, we first need context. Christmas has always been a pressure point in the Brown family's televised history. It's where fractures surface, where loyalty becomes visible, where exclusion is felt most sharply. Past Christmas episodes showed separate homes creating emotional distance, children openly questioning their father's presence, wives navigating favoritism under forced cheer. Christmas was never just a holiday. It was a stress test. And by this particular season, the family structure had already collapsed. Plural marriage was no longer functioning. Public separations were confirmed. Emotional alliances had hardened, which makes the absence of conflict on this Christmas suspicious. When history predicts chaos, why did this night appear so calm? What viewers actually saw. The aired episode was tightly edited. Scenes were short. Transitions were abrupt. Moments that normally lingered, didn't. Viewers noticed. Conversations ending mid-thought. Emotional reactions without clear triggers. Cuts away from tense body language. Nothing explosive happened on screen. But everything felt restrained. Almost curated. Longtime viewers, some watching since season 1, immediately sensed something was missing. Because this family does not suddenly become peaceful by accident. When editing feels surgical, what is being removed? The editing pattern that raised red flags. Reality television follows patterns. And when those patterns break, industry professionals notice. Several former TLC editors, speaking in past interviews about unscripted television generally, have explained that Emotional escalation is usually preserved. Conflicts are rarely cut unless legally necessary. Awkward silences are often intentional, but not empty ones. Here, however, the edits removed context. Fans began comparing raw continuity. Scene lighting shifts mid-conversation. Dialogue jumps without resolution. Reaction shots that don't match spoken words. This is not accidental editing. This is editorial containment. Containment of what? Emotion, or liability. Legal constraints behind reality TV. Reality TV is not lawless. Every cast member signs contracts that include behavioral clauses, defamation protections, mental health safeguards, restrictions involving minors. Christmas episodes are particularly sensitive because children are present. Emotions run high. Off-camera arguments often involve custody or favoritism. If a conversation crosses into allegations, verbal escalation involving minors, statements contradicting legal agreements, production is legally obligated to remove it. And silence becomes safer than spectacle. Was something said that could never be unsaid? Fan theories begin to circulate. Within 24 hours of airing, online communities reacted. On Reddit threads, viewers wrote, "This episode feels hollow. They skipped the argument but left the aftermath. You can see tension without hearing the cause." Facebook fan groups began freeze-framing scenes. Facial expressions mid-cut. Hands clenched during casual conversations. Children positioned strategically away from adults. YouTube comment sections echoed the same sentiment. We're being shown the result, not the reason. Why show the reaction if you hide the cause? Past episodes that mirrored this pattern. This wasn't the first time footage disappeared. Earlier seasons included abruptly ended confrontations, off-screen, resolved conflicts, cast members referencing arguments viewers never saw. In multiple reunion episodes, cast members hinted that wasn't shown. There was more to that conversation. Editing didn't reflect the full night. These admissions establish precedent. When something crosses a boundary, TLC cuts, not explains. What boundary might Christmas night have crossed? The emotional cost of what was removed. Removing footage doesn't remove impact. What remained on screen was emotional residue. Strained smiles, defensive postures, children unusually quiet. Psychologists who analyze reality TV behavior note that emotional suppression is visible. Tension manifests physically. Viewers instinctively sense incongruence. The result is discomfort. Not because something dramatic happened on screen, but because something clearly happened off screen. Silence can be louder than shouting. Editorial ethics versus storytelling. This raises a critical question. Is it ethical to show aftermath without context? Reality television walks a fine line between transparency, protection, manipulation. By removing key moments, narratives become incomplete. Viewers fill gaps with speculation. Trust between audience and production erodes. Yet production teams argue protection outweighs exposure. Not all reality is meant to be broadcast. Christmas night may have crossed from storytelling into harm. When does reality stop being entertainment? Long-term implications for the show. This editorial choice has consequences. Audience trust is fragile, and seasoned viewers notice patterns quickly. Since this episode, engagement shifted from discussion to suspicion. Viewers questioned authenticity. The show's credibility took subtle damage. When fans begin analyzing what's missing instead of what's shown, the format weakens. Reality TV survives on perceived honesty. Silence challenges that foundation. Opening parenthesis. Can reality TV survive selective truth? Why TLC will likely never release the footage. The unseen footage is unlikely to surface. Why? Because releasing it would reignite unresolved conflicts, expose legal vulnerabilities, contradict carefully maintained narratives. In reality television, deleted scenes are rarely deleted for drama reasons alone. They are deleted for risk management. And once a moment is deemed too risky, it stays buried. Some footage is cut not because it's boring, but because it's too real. What this moment reveals about the family. The missing footage tells us something important. Not about what happened, but about where the family stands. It suggests emotional volatility remains unresolved. Boundaries are still fragile. Certain truths are no longer safe for broadcast. Christmas didn't heal the fractures. It exposed how deep they still run. Healing doesn't require silence, but silence often signals damage. Audience responsibility in interpreting silence. As viewers, interpretation matters. Speculation can escalate harm, but blind acceptance erases accountability. The responsible position lies in between. Acknowledging editorial limits, recognizing narrative gaps, understanding why silence exists. Not every truth belongs on television, but every omission carries weight. Christmas night was not empty. It was edited. And in reality television, editing is storytelling. What TLC chose not to show may never be confirmed. But the decision itself tells a story. A story about limits, about protection, about a family no longer able, or willing, to expose everything. Sometimes, the most revealing footage is the footage you never see. Reality television is often described as raw, unfiltered, immediate, but in practice, it is one of the most carefully managed formats in modern broadcasting. Every episode passes through multiple layers of internal review. Story producers assess narrative flow. Network executives evaluate brand alignment. And legal teams review every spoken word for potential liability. If a moment introduces ambiguity, if a statement can be interpreted as an accusation, if a conflict escalates in the presence of minors, or if a conversation contradicts existing contractual terms, that moment becomes vulnerable. It does not matter how dramatic it is. It does not matter how real it feels. From a network perspective, risk outweighs ratings. In these situations, producers often choose containment over confrontation. They remove the spark but leave the smoke. Which explains why some episodes feel emotionally incomplete. Because what was removed was not filler, but the trigger itself. And once a scene is flagged at this level, it rarely returns. Not as deleted footage, not as bonus content, not even as clarification. It simply disappears. In emotionally complex family systems, silence is rarely neutral. Behavioral psychologists note that when open conflict becomes unsafe, either emotionally or socially, individuals shift into containment behaviors. They reduce speech. They control expression. They avoid eye contact. They comply outwardly while disengaging internally. On screen, this appears as calm. But it is not calm. It is compression. In this Christmas episode, several cast members displayed classic signs of emotional suppression, shortened responses, delayed reactions, forced neutrality in tone. These behaviors often emerge after unresolved confrontation, not before it, which suggests that something had already occurred, off camera or off air, before viewers entered the scene. Psychologically, this matters, because unresolved emotional events do not vanish. They remain active, shaping behavior long after the moment itself is hidden. When viewers sensed discomfort without context, they weren't imagining it. They were reading emotional residue. Television networks do not only manage content, they manage reputation. For TLC, the Brown family has always represented a delicate balance. Controversial, yet family-centered. Dysfunctional, yet marketable. A Christmas episode holds symbolic weight. It is expected to be emotional, but not destabilizing. An overtly explosive Christmas night, particularly one involving children, favoritism, or emotional breakdown, risks reframing the entire series, not as complicated family dynamics, but as institutional failure. In such cases, networks make strategic decisions. They soften edges. They shorten scenes. They prioritize continuity over clarity. From a corporate standpoint, this is not deception. It is protection of brand, of future seasons, of long-term viewer positioning. But every layer of protection creates distance between reality and representation. And viewers notice that distance. Audiences today are not passive. They analyze pacing. They compare episodes. They cross-reference reactions. When something feels omitted, viewers do not disengage. They investigate. This shift is subtle but powerful. Instead of asking, "What happened?" audiences begin asking, "What was hidden?" And once that shift occurs, the relationship between viewer and show changes permanently. Reality television depends on perceived access. When that access feels restricted, trust erodes, not emotionally, but analytically. Viewers remain engaged, but with skepticism. They watch more closely. They question more deeply. They no longer accept silence as resolution. In that sense, the missing Christmas footage may never be seen. But its impact continues to shape how the story is received. If you're here to question the edit, not just watch it, like this video to signal support for deeper analysis. Comment with what felt missing to you. Your observations are part of this investigation. Subscribe for ongoing breakdowns of hidden patterns and editorial power plays. And continue this case by watching the linked playlist, because this silence didn't start or end with Christmas night.